Hello, everyone. I think we're going to get started now. I understand a few more people are still entering, but let's kick things off. So, good afternoon. I'm really pleased to welcome you to this live conversation today on winning customer loyalty in the digital age. I'm Harriet Wright. I'm a principal within the FT Strategies team, and I will be moderating this discussion. For those of you who may be learning about FT Strategies for the very first time, we are the consulting division of the Financial Times, and we help organizations grow digital revenues using tactics to increase customer loyalty, grow subscriptions models, and deliver digital transformation. Today, we have brought together some of the leaders that we spoke to for our most recent report on the customer engagement imperative. And we'll use this time to have a conversation about the 3 critical initiatives that our research identified can amplify customer loyalty and accelerate business growth. We'll make time at the end of this session for questions, so please do ask away and post them in the chat. We will try to get around to as many as possible. But first, to my panelists, whom I will invite to say hello and introduce themselves. And I'm going to begin with Adam.
Thanks, Harriet. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Adam Hansman, quick background on myself, co-founder and president of the Athletic Media Company. We are a sports media publisher, subscription-based, and with operations in the US, Canada, and the UK. And we have been in business for about 5.5 years, growing to over 1 million digital subscribers in that time, and excited to be joined with the rest of the panel. And I'll pass to David for his intro.
Thanks, Adam. Hey, folks. I'm not sure I'm quite as exciting a background as Adam. I'm no founder, but I'm a head of marketing and loyalty at Virgin Money UK. So we're a UK-based financial services company. And I suppose what are the kind of things that I get up to? Campaigns, building our amazing rewards program, which we hope is going to be a key part of the Virgin Group across the globe. And then obviously customer relationship management across around 6 million customers, which is roughly the size of our customer base in the UK. Passing over to Zach.
Hi, everyone. ClassPass is a fitness and wellness subscription. We aggregate a network of fitness and wellness providers and then sell a monthly subscription to customers for access to that network. At ClassPass, I work on pricing and packaging, marketing, and business development, and super excited to have the opportunity to speak with everyone today.
Thank you, Zach. Hello, everyone. I am Tara, and I am the Managing Director of FT Strategies, which, as Harriet said, is the FT's digital growth consultancy. And I spend most of my time at FT Strategies helping organizations build sustainable business models, drawing on the expertise of the data and strategy experts who transformed the Financial Times into a successful digital media institution. I also have a background in digital transformation, having spent about 15 years in this space with a particular interest in tried and tested strategies across customer engagement, recurring revenue models, and culture change.
Thank you, Tara. So the first initiative we want to discuss today is customer-centric business models. And this was something which came out of our research, where 83% of respondents in the survey said that they had adopted a subscriptions-based model and they saw benefits as a result, including more predictable and increased revenue. So firstly, to Adam, you said within the report that The Athletic has been singularly focused on subscriptions since its launch in 2016. Why is this the case, and why did you make that decision to have such a clear focus on that?
Sure, great question. So, quite honestly, as a founder, my my starting point and my co-founder, we started The Athletic because as customers, no one was thinking of us. We were frustrated at the lack of the, content in sports media and the lack of quality original reporting, in part due to the horrific user experiences wrought by the ad-supported model. For us, the way that you can sort of solve that is via subscription. Bringing the customer, the reader, the fan, in the case of sports, back into focus. And for us, we said if the content is good enough, if the user experience supports that, we thought there'd be many consumers who would happily pay the subscription fee. And it's really no different than in other consumer categories where the customer is at the center, like a Netflix or an HBO. Singularly focused on that. And we have been largely validated in that view over the last 5.5 years. We've grown, as I mentioned in my intro, over 1 million digital subscribers, one of the largest digital news subscription businesses in the world. Exciting part for us now that we've maintained that focus is that I think you start to tap into really a flywheel around the subscription model. Basically, you continue to put out what you hope is the best product in the world. You grow your subscriber base via that product, and then you really reinvest the growth and to continue to make the product better and better for your end customer. And pretty soon, no one can compete with you. And so for us, the only thing we're really terrified of, and it's why we've stayed away from too much of a kind of the diversified revenue approach that other companies have taken, is the trade-offs actually scare us. And this idea of, well, we can run a sponsored post or a video ad here or there, and then what's the harm, right? And eventually you find yourself in the middle of trying to kind of appease two oppositional groups, two customers, which are consumers and advertisers. And so for us, we believe we can build $1 billion company focusing on subscription, focusing on our end customer. Let's be laser focused on that and see where we come out. And focus can be really liberating. But there's a saying in sports, American football, where if it said you have two quarterbacks, it means you have none. And I think there's an application of that in the way that we think about our end customer is a consumer and not a third party that's sort of in the middle there somewhere. So the other thing to mention, of course, in the media space at least, subscription can be a great equalizer. No media company in the world can build an advertising product that Facebook or Google can offer and build. So for us as a startup, trying to compete for those dollars, we just stay away. And so for us, like this in sports, it's the fan. The fan is at the center of every single decision that we make. Every piece of data that we look at roads lead back to the end customer, and we have just been laser focused on that for 5.5 years, and largely have reaped the benefits of that.
And this is it. I mean, it can bring incredible benefits, as we saw, kind of predictable revenue and increased revenue. But I'm interested, Zach, one of the things which you mentioned, which is that subscriptions can also be a double-edged sword. So what are some of the challenges you see with having a subscriptions model?
Sure. So I would say a couple things on this. I think the first is, in a subscription model, if you think about what the customer is sort of doing or the decision that they're making, they're sort of saying, hey, I'm going to give you a certain amount of money every single month. You're going to have my credit card on file, and you can charge me every month before I deliver you any service, before I deliver you any value. And I just trust that you will do so month after month after month. And so what comes with that is an expectation of, a higher level of service and a real responsibility on the part of the subscription provider that you're giving the customer their money's worth month in and month out. And of course, in some cases, that level of service can come at an expense, at a higher expense. So there's that aspect to it. I think the other thing that we observe being in the subscription business is that there's a higher degree of difficulty for decision making. So COVID is a really great example of this for ClassPass, the complexity around when and how we bring our subscribers back to recurring billing. When COVID started, we put all of our subscribers on pause because our network was effectively shut down all around the world. And we had to make a decision as COVID progressed, okay, when is the level of supply in any given local area sufficient such that it's an okay choice to make to let customers start using ClassPass again? And should we do that on an opt-in basis or an opt-out basis? We're a two-sided marketplace. We have a responsibility up to the other side of the market to send revenue and reservations to our suppliers. And so not having any customers on recurring billing means we're not sending our partners any revenue. And so we have a really delicate balance there. And that's a very high degree of difficulty decision that a transactional business, a transactional a la carte business would not have to face. So when you think about subscription unit economics, another example where you're sort of looking longitudinally at the way that customers interact with your service over time, and you look at, well, what do early life customers do? What is their usage? What is their churn? What about midlife? What about late life? To the extent that you want to make any change, either in ClassPass's case, let's say we want to change a policy around how we charge people for not showing up to a class, we have to think very deeply about, well, how does this impact the unit economics longitudinally over time? And you can't do that with an experiment just over 1 day, 1 week, or 1 month. You have to sort of watch it play out. And for that reason, you just have this sort of higher complexity, higher amount of difficulty as you make any changes to your business. You can't sort of make decisions on a dime. You have to be very, very careful in measuring and being empirical about the effect of things that you do on unit economics.
Yeah. So it's a sophisticated operation, and I'm interested if we think about how a subs model has been implemented in the FT. Tara, what would you say it's done to help improve and also enable us to measure customer engagement?
A number of benefits. The first is it gave us something fundamentally valuable, data. First-hand customer data, which is useful not just for subscriptions, but has been useful for our other revenue lines, including advertising and events. And this data meant that we could understand our customer at a far deeper level. And this understanding and empathy for who the end user is, as opposed to, like Adam was saying, another third party or intermediary, meant that we were able to really laser focus on creating a more superior customer experience, which drove loyalty and lifetime value. And the other thing as well that it helped us to do was to really take control of a direct relationship with our end users and to reduce our reliance on other intermediaries, whether it's advertising. And that shift in emphasis to the customer meant that we were able to focus on meeting their core needs and building a valuable long-term relationship. And that focus really transcended across the entire subscriptions lifecycle, from the moment a user comes onto our digital real estate. We're gathering data at the point of registration. We gather data at the point of onboarding and through in-life experiences, app usage, reading newsletters, who they're following, etc. All of this is really creating a virtuous cycle that gives us valuable data to understand who that reader is and everything about them, what they care about, what they value, but also to then build a far more valuable experience, from personalized journeys to understanding the best way, the best time to serve content, but also if we think about it commercially as well, it really empowers us to make very important decisions around the types of offers, the pricing, in a way which is really anchored on the consumer and designed to maximize the amount of value that we get, but also give. I'd say the final set of benefits were, in a way, actually around some of the things that we had to do to be successful as a subscriptions business, which also delivered long-term benefits. So, for example, we had to create a culture that focused on value, not volume, which meant that we were, again, really, really focused on everything about the consumer and how they were engaging with us. So things around innovation to reduce churn, thinking about our proposition in more creative ways. And to do that, to build a successful subscriptions business, requires a real sense of collaboration across different departments. It's, not the job of a single division to acquire and retain subscribers. It really requires different disciplines working together, breaking down silos, collaborating, testing, and learning quickly. So that culture of customer first, that culture of innovation really helped us to deliver even more distinctive solutions to our customers, which helped us to, again, improve their experience and improve value.
And this is obviously, as you mentioned there, the amount of data has allowed us at the FT to have really personalized journeys and hyper-personalized communications with our customers. And this is the second kind of topic that we found really valuable in our research. I'm interested, David, if you can tell us a little bit around what Virgin Media have been doing with regard to personalized communication.
Virgin Money, but that's okay. It's fine. There's lots of companies
my head
in the Virgin
media.
Group where Virgin Money, but no.
Virgin Money.
Yeah.
Sorry, David.
It's interesting, even just reflecting on the last topic around subscription, that banking, weirdly, you could argue is a subscription-based model by default, because customers don't buy and consumer products on day one. They buy in for a relationship, you have package accounts, etc. And I think a challenge that we have, if we are going to continually deliver against fairly high and rising customer expectations, is how do we make sure in an increasingly digital age that we've got personal interactions with customers, the kinds of things that folks who've never experienced this will still hark back to the good old days when you could go into your branch and the bank manager would know everything about you. I mean, whether that ever happened or it didn't happen, it doesn't matter anymore. That's what people want and that's what they expect. And Tara, as you were saying, the richness of data that you get from a subscription model, well, we get that richness of data coming through from transactions. We get more insight on what customers are doing and should be able to predict with relative accuracy what they're likely to do in the future. We can probably predict better in many ways than they can themselves. Now, quite often banks will use that for credit modeling. We don't necessarily use it quite as well to enhance, build and deliver brilliant customer experiences. And I think one of the things that we mentioned in the report, was how we approached music as part of personalization. Now, I think it's quite an interesting angle for a bank. One, for a bank that's got the Virgin name, I think they've got a right to play in the music space a little bit. Virgin's got a little bit of music heritage about it. But we didn't just want to do some kind of random sponsorship or use that as some random mechanism to start communicating flatly to our customers. We could see quite clearly from transaction data, whether that's from credit cards or debit cards or subscription models to the likes of Spotify or Amazon Prime, right? We could see which of our customers were consuming music, how they were consuming that music, how they were consuming entertainment, and how that behavior had changed as a result of the pandemic. And I think as a brand, we want to be a bit more than just a bank. We want to have fun and introduce lifestyle. And again, the brand gives us a right to play in lifestyle in a way that maybe other banks can't. So we partnered with an events organizer in Newcastle in the northeast of England, and we introduced the UK, I think Europe. I'd like to claim the world, but that might be overstating it somewhat. But we introduced the first socially distanced music festival. Why? But because we could see from our data that a huge proportion of our customers were missing that, because their transaction behaviour showed that something they used to spend on, they're not now spending on. So let's try and introduce some of that back as a little bit of fun, as an opportunity. Why Newcastle? Our heritage as a bank gives us a slightly bigger footprint in that area, but we could see that the geographic spread of those customers who were most impacted by that change in behaviour was in the vicinity, in effect, of if we did it in Newcastle, we could get the best impact across our customers. We couldn't reach everybody, but we could still use our messaging across a broad range of customers to show that, hey, okay, whilst this is maybe for people within a 30, 40, 50 mile region, these kinds of things are the things that we as a brand can do for you, which no other bank can do. So, even then, you developed a proposition and a concept based on the richness of data. You've started to deliver the proposition to people within the immediate vicinity on a fairly personalised way, based on how they actually transact, without freaking them out, because customers don't want to be freaked out by us sharing too much of what we might know about them with them. Otherwise, that's when they'll start to switch off their permissions and get a little bit uncomfortable. But equally, you then can take the message to people who may be not as directly impacted by this particular offer, to demonstrate that there's more stuff that might be more suited to them coming down the line at a later date. And the impact was fabulous. I mean, we obviously got some great PR, which is lovely, but PR is not customers. What we saw was a big uptick in what we call customer smile scores in the immediate area. Smile scores is how we rate the customer experience that they have with us. So smiles and frowns, it's kind of our version of net promoter scores, probably a more universally known measure. But again, by seeing that we could directly impact the emotions of these customers, demonstrated success for us, demonstrated success for the brand, and none of that was about commercial gain from our perspective. It was absolutely about brand and experience gain. But guess what? When you do things the right way, what happens? You sell more products, and customers will buy further products from you. So even then, that kind of carries through to a commercial value.
Absolutely, and it's just a very creative approach as well to thinking through how content can be used to engage. Adam, I'm curious, at The Athletic, you've kind of explored different content forms such as Q&As, so subscribers can ask their writers and editors questions in real time. What sort of benefits have you seen through playing with the kind of form of content that you use? I think you're on mute. Oh, there we go.
Sorry about that.
Someone had to.
No worries. And I'll reference a couple of the ideas that I heard David just mention as well. It all roads for us, as I said, they kind of lead back to the customer. And one of the things, I know data is a big topic for today. One of the sort of insights we've been able to sort of glean looking at our subscriber base is this idea of a power user or a super fan, to put it in more sports friendly terms. And, we see incredible, if we can sort of establish a habit with that super fan, and sort of getting someone from kind of a casual to a power state of engagement, the long-term benefits of that in terms of retention, but as well, just those loyal customers become your advocates out, in the marketplace. And so for us, new forms of content are really geared around those super fans, delivering as much value, surplus value as we can. And, for us, we're a publishing company. And so conceivably one of the things we can do to sort of continue to serve customers is to put out more, more content, more volume. But what we've learned is that at a pretty low cost, you can, things like Q&As with our writers, you can pretty meaningfully like increase the degree of loyalty that someone actually has with your brand, and feeling like they're part of a club, a community. That one Q&A where they asked a question and a writer actually answered the question is worth as much as the value that the customer received from reading 20 articles that month, right? And we see that in the data for us. And so it's really like reaffirming that loyalty every day. When I heard Zach was mentioning kind of the double-edged nature of subscription, we take that very seriously, which is that once you get a credit card on file, there's this, you can probably coast for a while, and we didn't want to do that, so we wanted to continue to just start with the life of the customer, a day in the life of a sports fan. What are the needs that they have, whether it's when they're on their lunch break looking to get caught up on what's going on in sports, whether it's their commute and they're looking for a podcast. And so we kind of deconstruct almost like the possible needs against which we can build products for our customers. And the subscription model, the data, the first party data that you are able to capture and measure with that allows you to kind of take a customer first position on new product development, which is really cool. And so that, insights that we've gained just by like listening to and watching how our customers behave has actually led to us launching some of these new products that we have. So it's really about just increasing the intensity of the relationship. And we use an RFI kind of model. I think other publishers, I think the FT might even have a recency, frequency, intensity model that we look at. And so new products for us are just a way to continue to fit The Athletic as a brand into all the different moments that a sports fan experiences throughout, the day, the month, and the year, and the season, whether that's the highs of winning the match or the lows of, a super league is forming and there's, protesters in the streets. So we just try to be there for a customer at every one of those moments.
And that sounds like you have, a very data-informed and insight-driven approach to new content development and feature development. And this is obviously the third kind of initiative which we identified within the report, which is, having that data-informed approach can help unlock customer value. But from our survey, we found that this is one of those initiatives that businesses know is integral, but it's so challenging to implement. We had 40% of respondents reporting that they had adopted a data-informed approach, but many are still kind of challenging to think about how to make that a reality as much as it's a great vision. Zach, at ClassPass, you use data really effectively, from kind of continuously A/B testing new features to mining insights to better understand the audience's needs. What benefits have you seen from those strategies of using data?
Well, gosh, I think the first thing that we see is that we can sort of eliminate the confirmation bias from decision making that can exist. You get passionate people together who really believe in a mission and have a point of view, a set of first principles, worldviews about how the business should operate, how we should serve customers, key decisions that we should make. And if you're not taking a data-driven approach, then, and many times you're being persuaded by emotion, you're being persuaded by what's happened most recently, all those sorts of human biases that creep in. And I mentioned confirmation bias because that can be, in some sense, sort of the most insidious. You just glance at the chart that tells you what you presuppose or what you want to believe, and then you're off and running. And so being really, really empirical allows you to sort of smooth that out and be intensely logical and not make mistakes in your decision making. The other thing that I'd say being intensely data driven allows you to do is to kind of increase your pace and velocity of innovation, because, again, going back to what I said before, you're not being religious about choices that you're making. And so sort of everything is on the table. You're not, as long as you're adhering to your principles and you have a worldview about how you want to operate the business, then sort of anything is fair game. And this is something that at ClassPass we hold really near and dear to our heart, because we had to spend a really long time innovating on our business model in order to get to a recurring subscription with a virtual currency that sort of made sense for both our customers and our partners. We had an unlimited model 5 years ago that was really, really great for customers. They saved a lot of money on classes that they took, and it was incredibly motivating. But it wasn't economically sustainable, and it wasn't great for partners. And so we had to iterate around that. And because there were sort of such strong points of view on, well, what's the right next model to pursue? In some sense, we are just a big pricing and packaging Rubik's Cube, where we have this giant catalog of millions of classes, and how we aggregate them together into a consumer subscription. You have lots of different degrees of freedom. And so we just got really, really disciplined and empirical around, okay, let's now iterate through a sequence of potential models that could work for ClassPass, and eventually we landed on this credits thing. So without that approach, without that philosophy about being data-driven, we never would have been able to get to where we are today.
Yeah, it speaks to one of the things, Adam, you mentioned within the report, which is that data is everything, and you'd be flying blind if you didn't have it. And you've built great teams around that. I'm curious, just on this point of like building great teams, like how have you actually implemented the data is everything mantra into the business?
Sure. Yeah. So I think and as context, our product is it's a mobile app and a website for sports fans. It's highly personalized, and we're collecting sort of millions and billions of data points on what people are reading, what people are following, what people are which pieces of content are people commenting on, or in some cases we actually do collect an NPS score for each article. Frowns and smiles, I think, was the it's very similar for The Athletic. And so we even when The Athletic was me and a co-founder and an editorial staff 5 years ago, we were already starting to collect a ton of data, and that was kind of the ground zero to say, like, what are some teams that we almost had the data before we started building the teams and before we started scaling our model. And so we for us, like, I think just being from Silicon Valley, I think that's sort of in our DNA to just obsess over data. And one of the sort of the fatal flaws that we saw in with some other like media companies was just like journalism sort of was still being done the way it had always been done, and or at best looking at things like clicks and page views and vanity metrics like that, as opposed to how do you actually measure a user enjoying a piece of content? Like, how do you actually sort of pin that down? So a lot of challenges, unanswered questions for us. We really, one of the kind of core principles for us is just providing feedback loops to our teams. And so, one of the teams that we built was actually we call it our content analytics team, and they're a group that sits with our editorial staff, and every single day having conversations around what are subscribers responding to, what are they not responding to, and that was just our starting point. Was we were collecting so much data, we knew that was kind of germane to the model, and every single team at the company today, whether it's your editorial staff itself, the content analytics team, CRM team, acquisition and pricing, we were really a blank canvas 5 years ago. And so we had the ability to make sure that every team, as we were sort of launching those, like KPIs were sort of like the driving force behind the hiring. And so one thing I would say though, and so we obviously obsess over data at every moment of the day. But one thing in media, at least, that's been sort of interesting, almost as a counter to my point that data is everything. We know there's articles and there's content that people will click on, and then we know there's articles and content people will click on that like reaffirm their loyalty to your brand, and those don't always perfectly line up. And so we've even been able to do things like, for example, we run a script in our comment sections to detect when people use certain phrasing and language that could be something like, "This is why I subscribe to The Athletic," and we capture that sentiment. Because it's not always just the data can be sort of this blunt thing of like people clicking on an article and they might really dislike it or not respond well to it. So having those priors as well, like understanding a little bit around just like how do sports fans think, what do they care about, and not just being so kind of literal with data, I think is just as important as the measurement and capture and feedback of the data itself. So very proud of the teams that we've built on this. And it's always about finding a balance too, because the next great idea, we do consider ourselves to be like data driven like product folks, but the next great idea might just be a crazy idea that someone had, right? And so we try to keep that in the right balance, but it is like sort of core to everything we do, as I think most subscription businesses would attest.
Yeah, and I think kind of being a 5-year-old business, you are in a position where you can bake that in from the very beginning. And it can be kind of integral to your mindset and hiring people, and that's quite different if we're thinking about slightly more established businesses like the Financial Times or Virgin Money. So, David, I'm curious from your perspective, how has data informed your strategy on increasing customer loyalty, and how is that permeated through your team?
Yeah, I mean, you touch on a very good point. Data's hard in an established business, especially one like we've been through a journey where two banks came together just a couple of years ago. So we have multiple different databases. We have multiple different consent models within those databases, which means how we speak to a customer is different depending on which consent we think we hold on them. And increasingly, as customers start to hold products across those various databases, it becomes really, really intricate to manage. So we need to invest in that, and we'll solve that, but it's not something that you solve with a click of the fingers. I think how do we use data to try and inform that kind of loyalty? I suppose it touches a little bit back on what I was saying earlier around the music. There's a proposition that we brought to market late last year called Brighton Money Bundles. It's basically using some of the language of the mobile phone industry in the UK and introducing it into banking. And one of the as well as getting a current account, great. You got a crate, 15 bottles of luxury wine, fabulous. And you got unique deals for Virgin Media as well, like a home experience. And what drove us to decide that was the model, given that launching a current account, opening a current account in the UK is largely driven by cash and people having been given cash for open. Because again, it was watching how customers' behaviours were changing, and not just the data that we could see from transactions, but we run a range of customer panels. So we speak to customers as combined groups on a very, very regular basis to both temperature check, to generate ideas from them, to test ideas with them. It was bringing that stuff together that suggested customers were really depressed about being at home. They were clinging on to the idea of Christmas with a little bit of excitement. And in the main, we could see then from transaction data that actually people were buying wine, things like that. There are certainly customer groups who aren't in that kind of space, but again, we go in with the knowledge that we can't please everybody all the time, so we make sure there's alternate offers available. So we use data to introduce this this new kind of bundle approach. Great, it worked brilliantly, but we didn't stick with it. So what we noticed throughout December and then January, and we've got an arm of the business called Virgin Money Giving, which is a charitable kind of donation and raising arm. We saw massive drops in donations to charities from our customer base. One of our aims as a brand is to be a force for good. Banks aren't that often credited with being a force for good. Again, with the Virgin name, we think we have a right to be a force for good, and we think we can. So rather than stick with a proposition that we thought was good, we tweaked it. We tweaked it based on a change in that behaviour. We introduced a charitable donation component. Guess what? It appeals to a slightly different customer group, and it breathes new life into the proposition, and it continues to drive your smile scores. And as, again, the environment is changing, lockdown in the UK is easing, people aren't thinking about staying at home, they're thinking about going out and celebrating and experiencing again. So guess what? We'll use that data, we'll use that insight, and we'll look to change our approach to the bundle. I won't say quite what, otherwise I'll get shocked because we've not told anybody outside of the bank what it's going to be yet. But you can imagine if people are leaving their house, it'll be things that involve leaving the house rather than things that you can enjoy sitting on your sofa. But the importance of that is not getting, and again, it kind of goes back into one of Zach's points around subscription. You're tested every single day on, if you're not just selling a product, you're actually selling a subscription style model. You're tested every single day to deliver against customer expectations, which means you have got to look at the data to make sure that you're in tune with how the trends are changing, both at a macro level and also at an individual level, and then you respond to that. And if you get lazy, then you'll lose. So we have to use data. There's no choice.
Yeah, and this is a time when behaviour is changing so quickly, and we need to be as responsive as possible. Before I move on to the final question, I just wanted to also ask if people have questions, please do post them in the chat. We'll be shortly getting on to questions from the audience, so looking forward to those. Tara, I'm curious, from the clients we work with at FT Strategies, what have you seen as interesting ways that companies have used more data-informed approaches across our client base? And
I love the emphasis on informed as well, because I think there was a phase where everyone talked about data-led, but as has been said many times, I think inspiration, information from data, combining that with intuition, all of the other talents that we have is the winning combination. A few ways, and actually some have already been mentioned, but I think one around deepening customer empathy, also interesting approaches around measuring data to then inform key decisions, and then finally, building on that, predictive and more prescriptive tactics in response to insights from data. I think on the empathy point, we're seeing really interesting approaches to how companies are using data to segment their customer base, which further deepens their understanding of the customer. As I said earlier, we build very detailed personas at the FT and with clients, and that really helps to orient the mindsets of everyone, from the people producing the content through to testing the pricing, distributing the products. And I think the ability to really anchor yourself in the frame of who are they and what do they care about is a really important precursor to top-notch customer service. Apparently at the FT a long time ago, one of our divisional heads would go to a number of departments, including the newsroom, time and time again, really talking about who people were serving, who they were writing for, who the customer was, not at a high level, but at a very detailed level. So it's not just an FT reader, it is a 37-year-old professional financial services lawyer who travels between these continents once a month, and really getting down to the sort of attitudinal level beyond the demographic, to help people understand what really mattered and what to focus on. I think on the second point around measurement, very similar to what was mentioned, ROV is a tactic that is used at the FT, is used with clients to really help dynamically track and respond to data. So for us, it's R for recency, the number of visits in the last 90 days, frequency, and then the amount of volume, amount of content that has been consumed, so volume. And these three factors combine into a complex equation, but produce a very simple number, 18.2. A user with an engagement score above 18.2 is considered engaged. And this matters because for us, engagement is the holy grail. We know that it has a huge impact on cancellation rates and a positive impact on a user's lifetime value, which is our North Star goal. And the other great thing about ROV is it is an actionable metric, which is the final point around looking to that data to help inform what the most relevant next best action is. So again, we're seeing more and more organizations use this not just to predict, but to prescribe what to do. Everything from, for example, feeding that data into propensity to subscribe or to churn models. So when engagement score goes down, that can then automatically trigger a number of things like a win-back campaign to drive attachment to the brand, or offer right-sized discounted pricing, for example. But I think the ultimate message here is that data can empower and can guide and is a very powerful lever to invest in that ultimately helps businesses build successful business models.
Thank you, Tara. And I think I'm going to move on to the audience questions here because we have about 10 minutes left. And just on that point you were saying there around, data informed, as we've been discussing. And I'm going to ask this question to Zach, actually, which is, do you find that you have to adapt your strategies for different online behaviors in different parts of the world? So thinking about different cities that ClassPass operates in, have you created a kind of one approach, or do you adapt?
Yeah, so I have kind of a counterintuitive answer to this one, which is that the local adaptation and innovation that we see, because we're a marketplace or an aggregator of experiences in fitness and wellness, all of the local innovation is actually happening at the supplier level. So if you look at what is popular in terms of workouts in the Netherlands versus Sao Paulo versus Sydney versus New York, it's all actually quite different. And there are new concepts that are constantly emerging, the mashups of different genres, cycling plus boxing together or what have you. You sort of see these new concepts emerge, and ClassPass effectively is a vessel in which these experiences can show up. And the only real localization that we do is A, around translation, and B, in terms of the personalization of the experience that our users will get in terms of recommendations and all the sorts of supply that we will showcase to people. But as far as like specific customizations or localizations of the app experience goes, ClassPass actually works really well as a homogeneous experience. That's worked out really well for us because we don't have to have a huge engineering team with local people innovating all around at the margins. We really can rely on the creative spirit and energy of all the local fitness and wellness entrepreneurs who list their experiences on our platform.
To add on this time, which is, how does the acquisition score impact customer loyalty and ARPU? And what's your framework for deciding between new high volume, low loyalty ARPU channels versus acquiring that core high LTV customer?
cutting out a little bit. Sorry about that.
No worries. Did you hear? Oh, you didn't hear me. Let me repeat the question.
It was cutting out at the beginning. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. So let's take the first part of the question first, because there was two things baked into there. So firstly, how does the acquisition score impact customer loyalty and ARPU in your experience?
Got it. Yeah. So I think our customer acquisition team, we're looking at a lot of different elements in terms of the target customer, the sort of the various like steps along the way in terms of the cost per, the CPM, the cost per download, the cost per, registration. And ultimately the thing you care about isn't so much those like early signals, but signals that you're not going to be able to sort of measure until much later. Namely, does the customer stick around after one swipe of the credit card? And so on a paid marketing basis, the thing we're really optimizing for is user quality. We like any other direct-to-consumer online company are constantly creating audience archetypes based on lookalikes and other inputs to just really know who we're targeting, and like to put that into a little bit more of a specific case in sports. For us, generically speaking, like one thing about our target customer that it sort of sticks out is we do very well with fans who are like not living in the market in which they have like their fandom. We call them expat fans, and so the targeting those fans can be difficult, but we know that they tend to be extra loyal to if they can find great information reporting on their teams, right? So having that insight to be more comfortable with early signals and the sort of the roller coaster of customer acquisition in terms of CPMs and all that, knowing that like what you're really solving for is LTV and not the upfront ARPU or the upfront sort of the cost per acquisition. So that's really that's really how we think about that. But in terms of and I would say the same principle of like really knowing who our customer is, knowing how we serve them, informs everything we do from a growth standpoint. So it's not just the paid marketing, but if you think about for a publisher like The Athletic, we increasingly are finding that we can drive subscription growth via search, via SEO, and the types of content that you can sort of generate a significant amount of traffic via Google it may not be the type of content that allows you to keep a user after they sort of found their way to your site. And so there's always a little bit of that kind of there's a lot of counterintuitiveness to like someone may click onto The Athletic to see just what was the news story from last night, and the reason they stay is because you've got in-depth coverage on the team that they care about, right? So trying not to like be so sort of short-sighted around early signals and over-optimizing for those has been kind of our approach. With the primary aim is really avid sports fans sticking around for year after year with us.
Thank you. And kind of like on the flip side of this, a slightly different question, which has come from the audience. And David, I'm going to ask you this. What are your best non-data driven strategies? So the statement here, data only, sounds like often you're left with a reactive and conservative retention strategy. Is there things which you do which are anti-data within Virgin Money, which you can tell us about?
Crikey, anti-data. I don't think I'd say there's anything we do that's anti-data, but I think we have to recognise that you form relationships with customers based on how they interact with ultimately with your brand or the services that you're offering. The data is just, I think as Tara said, it helps to inform what you do. It doesn't take your decision making away. It doesn't build a proposition for you. I think even this has got elements of data within it, but we launched a proposition last year, again, kind of at the outset of the COVID pandemic when that took hold in the UK, called Money on Your Mind, and it was reflecting less on changing behaviours at that point within our customer base, but more reflecting on how the media was reporting the response of people across the nation, how the anxiety levels that they were maybe feeling around the potential impacts of things shutting and what it would mean for them personally, for their business. And to be honest, we looked at one of the key assets that we had as a business, which was our customer-facing colleagues. Quite often in banking, having a high street presence, a store presence, is seen as a bit archaic, a little bit of a hindrance, and maybe a cost drag. I think in this kind of instance, it was an absolute star weapon, because we had some very Virgin DNA kind of colleagues, our red team, who just knew how to speak to people. They know how to speak to people to help them with their problems, whether that's anxiety about what might happen to their business, or whether it's more fundamental that they can't pay a credit card bill, right? So we introduced this concept of Money on Your Mind because we thought there was a challenge in society, and we had a brilliant asset with our customer-facing colleagues. But we didn't ignore data. We would still monitor the impact that it was having on the smile scores of people who'd interacted with it, new customers who were maybe joining us as a result of the proposition. We even introduced a new way of interacting with customers digitally, specifically to, I suppose, to fast track and approach past our contact centres if people were struggling to get hold of them, to submit questions that they were having. That enables us to interrogate data. It helps us to inform. We were creating videos, putting on YouTube in response to the most common questions that we were being asked about the financial anxiety. So even that, which was something that was driven less about data at the start, still use data to make sure that the proposition remains relevant, grows and develops.
Yeah, and it always has to be that balance between kind of independent thinking, creativity and data, which is definitely something we've had to kind of step across within the newsroom at the FT. I think that's about all we have time for today. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for joining. And please, everybody who's watching, please do download the report and have a read. All of the things which we've referenced in here will be in there. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any further questions or want to discuss any of the topics which we've gone over today. It's been a real honour to have you all. So thank you, and thank you to everyone for attending.